A vast expanse of earth and sky that rises and falls for thousands of square miles across a massive plateau, 5,000 feet high. Although first seen by Europeans in the late 1800s, it was established only in 1951 as a national park, a haven for the wild creatures that live here, a commemoration of the way it looked when humankind was young. Now, man has set aside this ageless landscape, where the herds still move as they have for thousands of years. Situated in the East African nation of Tanzania, Serengeti National Park and its environs comprise the Serengeti ecosystem, an area defined by the migration of the great herds of wildebeest. Together, they cover 10,000 square miles. Miles to the south of the park, Tanzanians come to market to buy and sell the harvest from nearby farms.
Now, let's see what we need. Do you need any eggs?
Famed wildlife photographer and naturalist Baron Hugo van Lawick, accompanied by his son, shops for provisions for his Serengeti camp, a day's drive by Land Rover. Negotiating in fluent Swahili produces smiles and lower prices. Returning from business trips abroad, Hugo van Lawick often passes through this village, en route to the camp he established years before as a base for his work. Coming to Africa from the Netherlands at age 22, Hugo carried little more than a compelling desire to photograph wild things. To his good fortune, he soon met famed anthropologist Dr. Louis Leakey. In 1962, Leakey would send the young photographer to film a new study of chimpanzees conducted by Jane Goodall, one of Leakey's former assistants. In 1964, Jane and Hugo were married. In the coming years, their field observations and Hugo's photographic record would document previously unknown behavior of the remarkable apes. Their son, Baron Hugo van Lawick IV, nicknamed Grub, was born and raised in Africa and spent his early life around chimps and baboons. Although his parents divorced in 1974, Grub still spends time in Tanzania with each of them. Now he returns with his father to familiar terrain, and together they travel to Hugo's camp called Ndutu, which in the language of the local Maasai means a peaceful place.
I kept the camp at Ndutu canvas and very simple buildings and purpose. I've noticed often that if you put up a single building here in Africa, then very quickly it becomes a little village and the whole area then changes. And the last thing I want to do is to be a cause of changing this place. I would like it to remain as it is.
The Serengeti endures today as it has through the centuries, as predators and prey maintain their ancient system of checks and balances. Two and a half million animals weave the delicate fabric of Serengeti's life. Hugo van Lawick seeks to understand animal behavior and the relationships between Serengeti's wildlife and their environment.
Jambo bwana.
Asante sana.
Asante.
So, I'd like to go here and right up here.
Yeah.
There's enormous variety in the landscapes here. This is rolling sort of country and acacia tree country.
To travel such long distances, Hugo plans carefully for tomorrow's photographic safari.
I don't think I've ever been there before, have I?
Yes, actually you have, but you were only 2 years old then.
Oh.
And we spent about 4 weeks camping.
Cyrili, in charge of camp staff, is also the cook.
When I established my camp, I was keen to be able to spend as much time as possible on actual photography. For that reason, I took on Tanzanian staff. And we've really become a sort of family.
This case, in case can fit. Let's see.
In a world where spare parts are hard to come by, 2 mechanics work full-time to keep Van Lauwik's only means of mobility finely tuned. Without the Land Rover, there would be no expedition. Foot safaris are far too dangerous. A rose-colored veil on a distant lake attracts the experienced eye. Flamingos by the thousands feed in the alkaline waters.
Oh, it's amazing how these birds are accepting you. You want to try and get a bit closer?
Yeah, why not?
Yes, just move slowly forward, then lie down, go up to those little pools or something.
Patience is essential in the art of wildlife photography, as Grubb learns in the footsteps of his father.
I've been through various stages in my photography. I started off as what I call an artistic photography. Insofar I was interested in composition, I was interested in beautiful light. I then became much more interested in animal behavior. And so what became very important to me is recording this behavior. And then recently I've turned back more to artistic type of photography, trying to combine the two, trying to get behavior and beautiful scenery and beautiful light.
Van Lauwik's finely honed talent as a photographer, combined with a tenacity for hours of animal observation, result in his capture of remarkable scenes, like this hyena catching flamingos. It is October, the end of the dry season. The short grass plains lie parched beneath the equatorial sun. The wildebeest sense the onset of rain and start to move where new grass will sprout. Storm clouds begin to build and herald the season of short rains. Water rejuvenates man and beast alike, and soon it will transform the Serengeti into a carpet of grass. For now, it simply must be endured. Often, the blessing of rain can be disastrous. Flash floods swell creeks from trickles into raging torrents. Once, during a downpour, Van Lawick came upon a herd of migrating wildebeest, desperate to cross. In their panic, hundreds drowned in the overpowering current. When the waters subsided, they plodded on toward green grazing lands.
One of the advantages of living in one area among wildlife for so long is that you get to know a lot of the animals that live here so well, and you're able to anticipate where to be at a certain time to have a chance to photograph them. For many years, I hardly photographed elephants, but then I decided I wanted to spend some time with them. I noticed within a week that they actually recognized my individual car and trusted me more than the tourist cars. The result was that I could be in among 100 elephants, some within touching distance, and get good photography.
From his long hours of close observation, Van Lawick has rewritten old concepts of individual animal behavior.
In the science of animal behavior, originally, individuals were not considered important. It was the species that was important. But I've always been interested in individuals. I remember watching an inexperienced jackal mother who wanted to move her 3 cubs to a new den, but she was inexperienced insofar that she didn't really know how to carry her cubs. And so she pulled them out of the den by their tail and carried them by their tail to the new den.
Van Lawick tracked and observed a pack of wild dogs for 4 years and produced a landmark film that revealed their complex social organization and behavior as never seen before.
Each wild animal is a distinct individual with its own personality. And this can affect the rest of the group. For instance, in wild dogs, the first pack I watched used to hunt zebras. I later discovered this was purely due to 2 wild dogs, which were larger than the others and which could manage to hold a zebra still if they caught it. Once those dogs died, the whole hunting behavior after zebras died out. And so here were 2 individuals which were affecting the behavior of the pack. Somebody once said to me, "You've lived here for 30 years. Haven't you done everything you can on the Serengeti?" I haven't even scratched the surface. Not on a single species have I scratched the surface.
After 3 decades of work in Africa, a lifetime of discovery still lies ahead for Hugo Van Lawick, and the perfect picture seems always just beyond reach.
It's a feeling if you're camping on your own that you're the only person in the world. It's totally peaceful around you. Of course, that's very deceptive because actually it's very dangerous around you. But that's not the feeling you normally get until the lion roars. It's an enormous place, the Serengeti, and I'll never forget one day when I was standing on top of a hill looking over the short grass plains, which seemed to stretch on forever there. And a local Maasai walked up to me, and to my amazement, he said, "It's a big place, isn't it?" And Serengeti in Maasai means an extended place. But it surprised me because he'd lived there all his life. I would have thought by now he would have just accepted it. This is what the Serengeti does to you.
The lure of Africa has long drawn explorers to its exotic landscapes. Following the footsteps of early traders and missionaries, Western adventurers began a steady trek to experience it firsthand. Ernest Hemingway would write, "Now being in Africa, I was hungry for more of it. The changes of the seasons, the names of the trees, of the small animals and all the birds." On flying over it, famed aviator Beryl Markham would note, "The Serengeti lay beneath me like a bowl whose edges were the ends of the earth." A president, too, would leave his cabinet long enough to bag its prized possessions. For a time, the big game safari was the hunter's hottest ticket. As world opinion changed, trophy hunting was looked on with disfavor, and in 1951, the last safari of hunters walked out of Serengeti. Then in 1957, a pioneering team of naturalists from Germany, concerned for Serengeti's future, arrived in their single-engine plane. Dr. Bernhard Jimmick, director of the Frankfurt Zoo, and his son, Michael, would fly the length and breadth of the park to help create a long-range plan for its preservation. At first, they experimented with methods to capture animals, long since perfected. Before the refinement of the dart gun, animals were caught by hand in order to attach identification collars. It was the only way to distinguish one animal from the next and to trace patterns of migration. Their primary goal, a census of the scattered herds of wildebeest, could be accomplished only from the air. Day after day, they flew grid patterns from horizon to horizon. Their study laid the groundwork for a new approach to the conservation and management of Serengeti National Park. But their efforts exacted a heavy toll. In this land he worked so hard to preserve, Michael Jimmick lost his life when his plane fell to earth. Since the Jimmick's research, the numbers of wildebeest have grown sevenfold to 1.5 million, the largest population of migrating animals on Earth. Counting them is still done from the air as part of a project to monitor Serengeti's wildlife. Every 2 years, a new census is taken by Dr. Marcus Borner of the Frankfurt Zoological Society.
The subunit 1 begins now.
Through rods mounted on the struts of the plane, his assistants estimate the number of animals below and record the figures on audio tape. Every 30 seconds, Dr. Borner takes a photograph. The count will provide the distribution, density, and movement of the herds. The pictures will show the vegetation, erosion, and any human activity.
Okay, next transect is transect number 5.
Each time I'll personally fly over this great migration of the wildebeest, I feel very strongly that it is great that there's still a place in the world where an ecosystem is still relatively untouched by human influence. A place on the earth where there is animals from one horizon to the other. We are trying to support management in all kinds of things. That was always very much in Professor Chimwick's mind. A bit of research that is really related to the management of the park. We do that very gladly because we are convinced that what the government is doing here, they have a very enlightened conservation policy. The government of Tanzania spends about 2 to 3 times as much of their gross national product than the United States does on their national parks. It shows how serious the government here is to keep these areas, to manage these areas, and I think they're very determined. They don't have maybe big monuments like the temple in Greece or other monuments. For them, the monuments they have are areas like the Serengeti.
At park headquarters, Dr. Borner meets with Bernard Marigesi, the chief park warden, and shares the information from his recent survey.
How are things? Oh, fine. We are just coming back from a census, and it will take quite a long time, a few weeks to analyze properly. But what we wanted to come and report to you is...
Such cooperation between scientists and officials is important to the sound management of this diverse environment.
And what we suspect that they might be reacting to poaching pressure in the central part here in the woodlands. We can't give numbers, but it seems that about 1,000 have moved up north here, where they are better protected.
I will ask Mr. Magombi to send some rangers there to make sure that they are well protected, especially in the northern side.
Although Tanzania is a struggling third world nation, it maintains a strong commitment to conserve its natural resources.
The Tanzanians as a nation considers these wildlife as a national heritage. But it doesn't mean that this is our own heritage. It is also a heritage for every mankind all over the world.
Despite government efforts, trophy poaching, especially the killing of elephants for their ivory and rhinoceros for their horn, occurs inside the park. In the last decade, 90% of Serengeti's rhinoceros have been slaughtered. Only a few survive. More than half of the park's elephants have been killed, and now only some 500 remain. Along the northern edge of the park, local hunters poach animals not for trophies, but for meat to sell. As elsewhere, there are no fences to keep animals in, nor people out. Only a line on the earth marks the boundary between two worlds. The Tanzanian government employs some 85 anti-poaching rangers to police the park for illegal activity. This patrol finds evidence of a meat poaching operation. Pits and snares are intended for unwary animals. These are expert trackers, and the poachers now become the prey.
Vitu vya gani sasa?
Transport? Yes, for the state. Nani mwenye bunduki?
The culprits are caught with the butchered carcasses of antelope and warthog. They had established this small base to prepare the hides and dry the meat for sale at a local market. The average yearly income of these men would normally be the equivalent of about 160 American dollars. But in just the 3 to 4 months that migrating animals are in this area, they can more than double the amount by poaching. Instead, these men will be tried in court and may go to prison. As settlements press Serengeti's perimeter, poaching continues, and the government is now considering a new program. It proposes to open areas within the game reserves that surround the park where hunting wildlife will be allowed on a limited basis. It will not be the first time the needs of the people have been recognized. In 1959, Serengeti's boundaries were redrawn to create the Ngorongoro Conservation Area for the protection of the wildlife and the welfare of the tribe called Maasai. Believed to be descendants of tribes from northern Africa, the Maasai migrated southward along the Nile River and settled in East Africa about 400 years ago. With them, they brought a culture of strong family traditions and a social order that revolves around the keeping of livestock. In 1860, German missionary Dr. Ludwig Krapf wrote that the Maasai live entirely on milk, butter, honey, and the meat of cattle, goats, and sheep. Today, little appears to have changed. With no system of cash economy, the measure of a man's wealth is still the number of cattle he owns. Devoted herders, Maasai continue to live in ngangs or settlements side by side with their cattle. In the Tanzanian city of Arusha, one Maasai leaves the bustle of this urban village to return to his people.
To be living in two worlds is not easy. So I've developed this notion that I'll take the best of the West and retain the best of my tradition.
Tepelet Olisaitote was the subject of the 1972 National Geographic television special, Man of the Serengeti. Years before, he was the first member of his family to be sent away to school. On this occasion, he visited the classroom where once he'd been so frightened.
Good morning, children. How do you do?
How do you do? Thank you.
Sit down.
Thank you, sir.
When my father first said that you're the one going to go to school, first question was, what is school? And he says, place far away from your brothers and sisters, far away from everybody, of alien people. Oh, it was the most painful thing. And I say, why me? And he says, I know those who will come back and those who will not. And this one will, and that's why I'm sending him.
What did Gangwa do?
Saitote did come back, but after years in America and with a master's degree from the University of Michigan. Today, Saitote is given a lift home by old acquaintance Hugo van Lauwik. He recounts their first chance meeting many years before.
Something happened. The herd stampeded right ahead of him. Later on, I saw this boy running from a distance, not the guy who had been wounded, because that one started losing blood profusely. You know, he lost a lot of blood, so he was weak within a matter of... The lion just worked on him and left him. So we knew completely the guy would lose blood soon and he would be weak. He won't be able to walk. And that exactly happened. So I started running to the village. And I was the only one who spoke Swahili. and English in the area. So I was told that you have to go all the way to Leakey's to see whether you can get medicine or transportation to help us carry this person to the hospital. And that's when I came and I found you.
To Leakey's camp? That was in the early 60s. That was you?
Yeah, that's me.
Heavens, I never realized that. Yes, I remember it. I remember this young boy and the man running into the camp and telling me that one of your people had been attacked by a lion, grabbing the medicine chest, and then we drove for miles and treated this man with a big gash in his thigh. Is that right?
Yes.
How old were you then?
I was about 17.
Yes, and I was about, I suppose I was 22. Yeah. So what are you doing now?
I'm attending this ceremony, which is making me a senior elder.
But you are an elder already.
Yeah, I was a junior elder, and now this is the final confirmation of confirming me to a senior elder.
I didn't realize that that was divided into junior elders and senior elders.
Now he returns to his people who will benefit from these experiences, while he participates in an elaborate ceremony important to Maasai men. Saitoti is greeted first by the women and children of his village. It is considered respectful to bow and receive a blessing on the head.
I always really terribly look forward to, of course, to come here. Apart from the calmness of the countryside, the beauty of the landscape, and of course my children, my people at large, I always really look forward to come home. And there's always amazing serenity of peace when I come here.
Members of Saitoti's family live in the community called Albalbal, nestled on a slope overlooking Serengeti's rolling plains. Like all Maasai, they know by name each cow, bull, and ox, and love them as they love their children. Milk is the foundation of the Maasai diet, and is consumed either fresh or in a sour yogurt form. Saitoti's wife, Masienda, helps with the milking before day begins. Cattle remain inside at night for protection against marauding leopards and lions. A thornbush fence is opened so they can move out to graze.
Maasai cattle is life. I remember there was a time I was in the United States. I had a girlfriend I liked, and I told her, I'll give you a cow. And she felt really offended. A cow? And I was totally hurt, because for Maasai, a cow is the utmost, our survival. They even say any food without milk is not food. Without a cow, a Maasai wouldn't live, you know.
With a boyhood friend, Saitoti surveys his own herd nearby, tended by his nephews. Maasai are taught that they are the sole custodians of all the earth's cattle, as decreed by their god Ngai. But change has come to rural Tanzania with more farms, villages and people. The nomadic Maasai no longer roam as far with their herds in search of water. And during the dry season, the scarcity of water threatens the well-being of the cattle. Water is a problem for the people too. Every day, women and girls walk 3 miles to collect the precious resource from a spring. Without it, sanitary conditions worsen, leading to disease and death, especially among the elderly and the very young. Saitoti is worried. For lack of water, the future of his people is in jeopardy.
Water is life to us here. We have a small stream here, right by my village, which we share with baboons. It's a little tiny thing. In the dry season, the water practically becomes a drizzle. We have to wait for hours. For us, it's a necessity of life.
Once, a pipeline brought water to the Albalbal community, and this trough was full. But thirsty elephants that smelled the water in the pipes destroyed them, and the trough has been empty ever since. Appeals for repairs fell on deaf ears. Searching abroad, Saitoti secured $250,000 from the African Development Foundation for a project to provide drinking water year-round to people and livestock. As project coordinator, Saitoti explains to village elders the plans to rebuild the system and run a new pipeline from a permanent spring 15 miles away.
It's amazing to work with my people, having been away for a long time. I usually have the village leaders to work closely with me. We all work as a team, because they need this water.
Work will soon begin to clear the brush and dig the long trench in which to bury the pipeline. It is the day of the Olkiteng Lorba, the naming ceremony, and the women adorn themselves for the event. Saitoti now undergoes a ritual that precedes all Maasai naming ceremonies, the traditional shaving of the head. Masienda will perform the rite using only a razor blade. She anoints his head with milk, symbolic of the relationship between the Maasai and their cattle. Saitoti asks for extra caution when shaving near his throat. Even the eyebrows must go before the transformation is complete. Shaving his head symbolizes cleansing. Maasai men as well as women have their ears pierced at an early age. In the robes of an elder, Saitoti takes on a regal appearance, befitting of the new name soon to be bestowed on him.
It's up to the elders of the ceremony to pick a symbolic religious name which will benefit not only me but the Maasai at large.
His father, Leme Koki Olengia, is the senior member of the village. On seeing his reflection, his father asks, "Have I really become so old?"
My father is my idol. He's the guy who molded me. He's tough sometimes, but any man with a large family like the one we have, of 64 children and 8 wives, must be tough to see that the family stay together. And he does it, and he does it with style.
Ilmoran, the young warriors, arrive from neighboring villages to pay their respect to the honoree. An ox, selected from the herd for its good condition and color, is led away by the men to a secluded spot. It is suffocated with the dress of an unmarried woman, an act performed only on such special occasions. The throat is slit and a trough is made with the flesh of the dewlap. Milk and honey beer are mixed with the blood that collects. Warriors and elders drink from the mixture in a kind of communion. The ox is butchered and roasted for the entire village and guests. The better cuts of meat go to the senior elders. Special pieces from the chest of the ox will be used in the climax of the ceremony. Saitoti's father arrives to pronounce the blessing and gives Saitoti his new name.
My father always blessed me. Live long, my son. May people whom you meet like you. May you return back to us, to the shelter of your family who loves you. May you be blessed.
The ceremony now complete, Saitoti rejoins his people with a new name, Olotushulu, the unifier, an appropriate name for a man who bridges the gap between his people and the outside world. Before day's end, a game is played over a skewer of meat. Men and women junior elders chase each other away from the prize with whips made of tree branches. It's a rare opportunity for the women to beat their husbands. The stomach of the ox becomes a seat for Saitoti, his mother, and his wife for a final blessing. These spontaneous invocations bond the family and are a fitting conclusion to this memorable day.
The Maasai have poetry, which we call ewoko. We praise the landscape and the cattle, and even the warriors, the beauty of it all.
Man has lived in Serengeti for thousands of years. Perhaps never before has he so cherished its distant horizons. But its serenity is beset by forces that would alter its ecology and threaten its wildlife. There are some who want the land to farm and feed themselves. Some want to exploit its wildlife for personal gain, while others dedicate their energies and wits to protect it. Marcus Borner respects Tanzania's commitment.
It is the African nations who decide on the future of these parks. After independence, they have created 10 new national parks. And it's not because Professor Chimmick told them to do so. That is something that comes from within their tradition and their country.
For Hugo van Lawick, Serengeti has become a way of life.
I prefer being on the Serengeti. You get a feeling you're one with nature, you belong here, you're just a small part of it, really. While in cities, I think you get a feeling that only man is important. But in fact, we're all part of nature, and if we destroy these things, if we destroy nature, then we're destroying ourselves. I have no doubt about it.
Olotushulu, the unifier, is joined by warriors to clear the way for their future.
Now I have a yearning of wanting to help my people. Just the basics of life. A clinic, water like the one I'm trying to build, a school so they can move with the rest of Tanzania. The people must not live in isolation. Their destiny will not be in their hands. So I want the Maasai to participate like any Tanzanians in every endeavor the Tanzanians are pursuing.
For such men, the preservation of Serengeti has profound meaning. In the solitude and tranquility of this extended place, they hearken to the charge of Michael Jimmick, who rests here for eternity. Serengeti shall not die.
Antwerp is an old Belgian city with one of the world's unique zoos. Overshadowed by the central railway station and hidden by passing traffic, it has been for over 100 years the cultural heart of the city. Antwerp Zoo was founded at its present site in 1843. From the beginning, it was a major attraction. Concerts and theatrical performances held within the zoo soon rivaled the animals in popularity. In time, the zoo established an art collection, a symphony hall, and a theater. Today, the zoo is still an integral part of the cultural life of the city. Over 5,000 animals live in the small 25-acre zoo. Enclosed by the city, the zoo has begun to expand its living space by building up. Animal enclosures built one on top of the other camouflage the aging train station and help preserve the park's beauty. Antwerp is one city zoo not bound to the past. Others have been compared to city slums. An advocate of zoo reform is former London curator Desmond Morris, author of The Naked Ape.
There are many good zoos today, but the real problem they face is historical. They are still hanging on to an old Victorian idea. The 19th century menagerie was a place where people went to meet animals really for the first time. It was the age of exploring the world of animals when strange creatures were brought into captivity for the very first time, never seen alive before by man. And that meant that the menageries became very crowded and cramped. It became important to have hundreds and hundreds of cages, and the cages got rather small. The old-fashioned zoo cage is a rather sterile, simple place. And in the zoo cage, we can see the way in which animals suffer from the stress of boredom and gradually become more and more neurotic.
The problem is not simply one of physical space. Social and gregarious animals suffer depression from lack of companionship. Others become obese from boredom. New knowledge of animal behavior has led many zoo men to recognize the terrible legacy of the past. Slowly, the old prison zoo is disappearing. As the wilderness shrinks, the zoo may be the only place where man can seek contact with wild animals.
Some people have said that zoos are obsolete, that zoos should go, that we know enough now about wild animals and we can film them well enough in the wild to make it utterly pointless to confine wild creatures in small cages in cities. Well, it's a point of view and I sympathize with it, but I can't help feeling that if the city child is deprived of the chance of meeting wild animals face to face and smell to smell, if you like, and that is important because an animal isn't just a pretty picture, it's also a moving, smelling, roaring object, and if you get all these sensations combined, it becomes much more real than anything you're ever going to see on a screen.
The Club Row Street Market in London's East End has been held each Sunday for over 100 years. And for over 100 years, the people of London have come to one section of the market to look at and sometimes to buy common household pets. The British have a special love of animals. As a nation, they claim one of the world's first public zoos. As pet owners, they outdo most every other people. 46 million Englishmen share an island with 5 million dogs, 6 million cats, 8 million caged birds, and as yet, uncounted goldfish. England seems to have become a nation of parlor aquariums and backyard zoos. At Harrods, a fashionable London department store, there is a special boutique known as the Zoo. Catering to the sophisticated tastes of British shoppers, the zoo sells nearly everything, from ants to elephants. A slogan at Harrods Zoo: if it moves, we can get it for you. The zoo began as an exhibit to attract attention to other merchandise. Today it is one of Harrods' more popular departments. Hundreds of animals are sold over the counter or by special order to customers all over the world.
What about that owl? Is he tame?
At Harrods Zoo, exotic animals are not sold as living ornaments for the home. An eagle owl is not a common pet. Many customers are connoisseurs, starting their own private collections to breed rare or threatened species. In earlier times, aristocrats maintained private menageries for their own pleasure. Today, in England, one nobleman has turned his private collection into a means of supporting his 16th century estate.
I'm Lord Bath, and this is Longleat. This reserve was the brainchild of my partner, Jimmy Chipperfield, who came and saw me and asked whether I would permit a lot of animals to be kept in the park in which cars could drive through on a completely new idea, rather like they do in Nairobi, because he wanted to start a new concept of zoos completely, that where the animals were free and the people themselves were in cars, more or less in cages.
The animals of Longleat have adapted to life in the English countryside. They seem to be indifferent to its weather and its traffic jams. Each year, 1 million visitors provide amusement for Longleat's baboons. Longleat brought a bit of Africa to England and set a new style in zoos. People enjoy the proximity of animals, and the animals enjoy a last illusion of freedom. A near-perfect climate and the natural beauty of its setting have made one zoological garden world famous. The San Diego Zoo is one of Southern California's prime tourist attractions. Each year, the zoo is visited by some 3 million people. They come from all over, drawn by a simple, irresistible fascination with the animals of the world.
Welcome to the San Diego Zoo. One little word of caution, please keep your arms and legs inside the bus. We do go rather close to some of the trees and bushes. Now we'll go down and look at a favorite animal. Now this is
Not so long ago, there was nothing here but 130 acres of canyons and mesas. Now, a 45-minute rubber-tired safari rolls along asphalt trails through man-made jungles.
the Damara zebras. Zebras are all very uniquely marked. There they are right here. And here's your so-called laughing hyena, the spotted hyena, right in front. The hyena has what's considered
Where once wild coyotes roamed, there are now animals from every continent on Earth. It began in 1916 with a few animals left over from an international exposition. Today, its collection is one of the most varied of any zoo on Earth. Designed with a minimum of bars, cages, and fences, moats protect animals and visitors from one another.
settings you'll find.
There is in the San Diego Zoo an unmistakable touch of California showmanship.
Here we have Yogi and Boo Boo. Can you say hi to everybody? He's waiting for the bus to stop to make sure he gets something. Hi, Boo Boo. Show him your teeth right there. Look at those. He's got the finest teeth in the zoo. He used brand X. There you go. You got it there? Okay. Atu, Now, here's the situation. You're wounded on the battlefield. You got this? And a senior officer rescues you. What do? You salute. What if that paw is wounded? What do? You use the other paw, sure.
Though the San Diego Zoo houses one of the world's largest animal collections, the emphasis today is on breeding rare and threatened species. For many animals, the San Diego Zoo has become a center of survival. Summer festivals have always drawn thousands of people to European zoos. In East Berlin, a new zoo carries on an old tradition. The zoo was founded in 1954 on an 18th century baronial estate. 200-year-old waterways surround herds of animals which graze freely in the park. The 400-acre zoo is East Berlin's showcase for foreign visitors, many Russian soldiers on leave. The European Zoo has always been a place of entertainment and relaxation, a meeting place for people. Growing knowledge of animal behavior has changed the traditional role of the zookeeper. Once little more than a custodian, today he must also be an expert in animal care. In East Berlin, keepers serve a 2-year apprenticeship. The zoo's director, Dr. Heinrich Date, and his curators frequently inspect the work of some 25 student keepers. 60% of the apprentices are women. Apprentices rotate throughout the zoo, learning to deal with the needs of hundreds of different animals. From the curators, they receive formal instruction in zoology, ecology, and veterinary medicine. From the keepers, they acquire practical skills. In the wild, elephants walk miles each day. Nature provides a daily pedicure. In the zoo, their huge toenails must be trimmed several times a year. On the other side of the Berlin Wall, exotic animal houses built at the turn of the century give the West Berlin Zoo its distinctive character. The zoo's old-world charm belies a history scarred by war. The West Berlin Zoo was the first to be established in Germany. For over 100 years, it grew to become the largest animal collection in the world. Then, in 1945, the zoo became a battleground. Only 91 animals survived the war. West Berlin has recovered, and the glory of a zoo has been restored. There are some things that outlive differences between men. The bond between man and animal seems always to remain constant. The interrelationship between a keeper and his animals, the very essence of a zoo. Sam Morton has been a keeper at the London Zoo for over 20 years. Like his father before him, he made the zoo a way of life. Today, Sam Morton is head keeper in charge of London's bears. His day begins at dawn.
One of the most wonderful times in the zoo is when it's entirely empty. It's a great thrill to come in the morning when there's nobody about at all. Everything's so quiet, the birds are twittering, and it seems as if the animals are just coming out of their night's sleep, and there's an air of calmness about the zoo. You can talk to the animals or say things that people might think you're silly doing otherwise. I don't think people can get as close to me as what the animals can. The animals themselves depend upon me. They have nowhere else to go. They can't go to anywhere else. They must look forward to me for their food, their water, and even their comforts. I am their entire world, actually, other than their own species. I'm the envy of everybody. Every man, every child that comes in here must envy. Every boy you see wants to grow up and be the keeper. He wants to look after the famous Chi-Chi. He wants to look after the famous Pickle-Up, the famous bears. This is the zoo. This is me.
As a keeper, Sam Morton enjoys special status at the London Zoo. For 12 years, he has been caring for and comforting one of the most famous animals in the world, Chi-Chi, the giant panda. Though the giant panda resembles a bear, some believe it is more closely related to the raccoon. A Chinese ban on the export of giant pandas has left two outside the Chinese world, Chi-Chi, the female at the London Zoo, and An-An, a male at the Moscow Zoo. An-An was sent to London in hopes that the two would mate.
The attempted mating of Chi-Chi and An-An occurred twice. Both times Chi-Chi would have absolutely nothing whatsoever to do with An-An. She sped round that paddock like a racing car. Every time An-An came within 10 feet of her, up and away she went. Though An-An was quite prepared to do her stuff, what we wanted, Chi-Chi wouldn't have nothing to do with him. Her name Chi-Chi means naughty little girl. Sometimes we wish she had been.
Zoo authorities were at a loss to pinpoint the failure of these efforts. A few offered startling conjectures.
One school of thought is the fact that because Chi-Chi and myself have been associated for so long, that she regards me more affectionately than what she regards any other giant panda. This I utterly repudiate. I think it's a wrong assumption. And my own personal feeling on this is I think we just missed the boat. I think the two pandas...
The world's mammals are active by night. Their world, the world of darkness, is unknown and feared by many humans. By reversing the cycle of night and day, New York's Bronx Zoo provides a rare glimpse into the activities of nocturnal animals. Interior lighting of blue, green, and red is interpreted by colorblind animals as darkness, and they become active. Survival in the nighttime world has produced unique adaptations by nocturnal animals. Bats have a highly developed sense of hearing that guides them through darkness. A keen sense of smell enables other animals to locate food. Large, sensitive eyes help the slender loris distinguish movement. As animals of the night move about in a darkened world, zoogoers begin to understand the mysterious relationship between animals and the rest of nature. Darkness becomes a barrier that allows visitors to move among the Bronx Zoo's aquatic birds. Wireless enclosures are designed on the simple scientific fact that most birds avoid the dark. The scarlet ibis is at home in the swamps and mudflats of northeastern South America, where they often nest together in the thousands. Many that would not breed in small wire cages have begun to build nests and raise families in the grasses, mud, and sand of their home in the Bronx Zoo. Arizona's Sonoran Desert is a land of intense heat and bitter cold. The chuckwalla is one creature that has adapted to this harsh land. It lives in a zoo built around its desert home. The Arizona Sonora Desert Museum has gone underground with its inhabitants. In a darkened tunnel, visitors peer through glass at the burrows and dens of elusive desert creatures. Many see for the first time how animals have adapted to an unfriendly land and how they behave in their underground world. Since early settlers arrived in Arizona, much of the desert's plant life has been stripped and its water drained. Many rivers are a desert memory, and otters, once abundant in the Sonoran Desert, have found a haven in the zoo. In the zoo, man sees a reflection of his own life. Because they seem so much like ourselves, primates have always aroused conflicting emotions in human beings. They have been loved and hated, worshipped and hunted, imitated and regarded as objects of scorn. They have signified ignorance and wisdom. Primates are found in every tropical country in the world except Australia. They live in forests and jungles, in the mountains and on the plains. They vary in size, aggressiveness, and intelligence, but all share one common characteristic, a social instinct. In Spanish, he's called Copito de Nieve, little snowflake. The Barcelona Zoo's greatest attraction is the world's only known white gorilla. At the age of 2, Snowflake was found in a forest of Equatorial Guinea, clinging to his dead mother. Today, he clings to his keeper. When Snowflake mates, he will start a strain that may produce other white gorillas. But for the moment, Snowflake holds center stage. When a wild animal is denied its freedom, it is denied its very nature. The African plains of New York's Bronx Zoo brings the freedom of the wild to captivity. Here, animals live in a recreation of their home in Africa, and zoogoers begin to understand the meaning of life in the wild. open plains of Africa, animals do not live in absolute freedom. Each moves within a limited territory determined by the availability of food and the threats of other animals. In the Bronx Zoo, although they appear to exist side by side, predator and prey are separated by moats. Today, the challenge facing zoo men is not only to keep an animal alive, but somehow to preserve its way of life. Many have achieved recognition beyond the realm of zoos. Dr. Bernhard Chimmick is one. In his own zoo in Frankfurt, Germany, Chimmick is something of a legend. Over a period of 30 years, he transformed one of Europe's older and smaller zoos into an animal garden of international distinction. He is known in Germany and abroad for his books on wildlife and conservation. His flair for publicity helps attract nearly 3 million visitors to the Frankfurt Zoo each year. Chimmick discourages the idea that a zoo is a public playing ground. Feeding of animals by the public is prohibited, and there is no children's zoo. Chimmick believes the zoo is an educational institution. The animals are ambassadors for their species and represent a plea for their dwindling numbers in the wild. The Frankfurt Exotarium typifies Chimmick's pioneering spirit in animal exhibition. A gigantic refrigeration and heating plant generates power and produces climatic and environmental conditions that enable animals to live in a recreation of forests, jungles, and the polar ice cap. In the Exotarium, a community of Antarctic penguins have found a home away from home. The penguins thrive in the cool, germ-free air of the polar landscape. Penguins are flightless birds that have developed into streamlined divers and swimmers. In the zoo, penguins are susceptible to diseases unknown in the Antarctic. Even their food must be treated to prevent infection. Today, many animals receive extra personal care to ensure their survival in captivity. At Frankfurt, care begins in the nursery. Throughout history, monkeys and apes have been kept in zoos mainly to provide amusement. Until recently, little was thought of their physical and mental well-being. The Frankfurt nursery was designed to rear young anthropoid apes rejected by their mothers. Professionally trained animal nurses care for the infants on a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week basis. The growth rate of orangutans, chimpanzees, and gorillas is very similar to that of human children. Their needs during the first few months of life are essentially the same. In a yearly series of television broadcasts, Chimmick reaches out to 34 million European viewers to gain support for his wildlife preservation programs. He is West German cabinet advisor on conservation and a trustee of Tanzania's national parks. His pleas are often made against the senseless slaughter of African animals. Animals once roamed freely across the great open plains of Africa. Today, their survival is no longer taken for granted. Now there are men hunting wild animals, not for skins or trophies, but to save their lives. Wranglers are moving them into government-protected parks and reserves. Like zoos, national parks offer some hope of conserving wildlife for future generations. Man's efforts to capture and keep animals began in the Stone Age. When he lived in caves 25,000 years ago, man was mainly a hunter, and wild animals were essential to his survival. In ancient Egypt, the curiosity of the ruling classes inspired the beginnings of large animal collections. Roman legions often seized wild animals as spoils of war. Hundreds were destined for arenas where they served the bloody demands of gladiatorial combat. Animal spectacles later changed in form, but they continued in popularity. In the 18th and 19th centuries, traveling menageries and circuses maintained large animal collections. To meet a growing demand for more exotic species, huge caravans of animals were led out of Africa by the famous Italian collector Lorenzo Casanova. Casanova's largest consignments were shipped to the German Karl Hagenbeck, who held a virtual monopoly on the world's animal trade. Many animals were imported for Hagenbeck's own circus in Hamburg. In observing how far animals jump, Hagenbeck reasoned that moats could create an almost barless zoo. Today, a 2,000-year-old fort, which served as living quarters for kings and emperors, provides the backdrop for one of the world's most beautiful Hagenbeck-designed zoos. Expansive walks and luxuriant gardens make India's Delhi Zoo a jewel of exotic splendor. Lush flora from 5 continents grow throughout the 240-acre park. Delhi Zoo was founded in 1957 and now attracts over 1 million visitors each year. Most of the animals found in the Delhi Zoo are native to India. One breed is unique in the world. In the past century, white tigers have been seen only a few times in the jungles of India. The white tiger is not an albino, but a separate strain. There is no difference in the behavior of white and normal-colored tigers, but even at birth, white tiger cubs are heavier and longer. Because of their size, white tigers consume more food. At Delhi Zoo, each is fed about 24 pounds of meat a day. 13 white tigers at Delhi Zoo, the largest collection in the world. The director of the zoo, K.S. Sankala, is one of the world's foremost authorities on the white tiger. Sankala has devoted 5 years of his life to breeding these rare and beautiful creatures. All of Sankala's white tigers and others in captivity today are descended from one animal that was caught as a cub nearly 2 decades ago. 400 miles from Delhi, in the state of Madhya Pradesh, stands the statue and palace home of the Maharaja of Rewa. Here in the nearby forests, the Maharaja captured a white tiger cub which he named Mohan, that began the white tiger line. Escorted by the Maharaja's palace secretary, Sankala comes to visit Mohan, who is aging and in poor health. Mohan has lived for 19 years in the harem quarters of the palace. Since his capture, no white tigers have been seen in the wild. Sankala's breeding program began in 1965, 7 years after Mohan sired a litter of 4 white cubs. It is possible that by breeding Mohan, the beautiful white tiger race has been saved from almost certain extinction. Shortly after Sankala's visit, Mohan will die of old age. But Mohan's passing has not ended the white tiger line. 37 survive in zoos around the world. A half-mile by ferryboat from Manza, Tanzania, is a rocky 95-acre island where many Africans will see for the first time wild animals so much a part of their natural heritage. Only 70 miles from the Serengeti National Park, the Senani Island Zoo brings a new urban population into contact with animals. In a zoo, Africans and people everywhere see wild animals that are dangerous to man. Few recognize that the most dangerous animal has been man himself. The human race has accelerated the rate of extinction of animals by at least 4 times. Since 1700, over 230 vertebrates have become extinct. Nearly half were lost in the past century. Perhaps zoos are an expression of man's concern. The zoos of the world cannot restore nature's balance, but they can help preserve it.